Welcome to another episode of Revenue Leaders Uncovered. Super honored to be joined by Puneet today. Puneet, if you can introduce yourself, but also the awesome company you're working for.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Puneet, and I'm the CEO of Fieldwire by Hilti. I've had a unique background wherein I've actually lived in some 7 or 8 countries. I think this is country number 8. I'm in San Francisco in the United States currently. And I've had the privilege of having lived in Luxembourg, in Liechtenstein, in Switzerland, in France, and Singapore. So been around the world more or less. And I love building and growing software teams, and that's what I do. Yeah, and Fieldwire, at Fieldwire, we are construction management software. Yeah, we've been around since the year 2013, and we were acquired by the Hilti Group in 2021. And what we do is we ensure that construction crews on the field can coordinate very well and work very well with their personas who are on the back office. Yeah, and we ensure that construction best practices can be replicated from one construction project to another. And we offer our customers the ability to have peace of mind because they can reduce risk by capturing as-built information and handing that over to their clients as and when the projects are completed. So that's kind of what we do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, Fieldwire are I suppose I could say the term household name in the construction tech world. You're definitely one of the leaders in that space. So I was super excited to get you on and obviously delve into your experience. One question I don't normally ask is, but where was your favorite place to live or to work?
I think to work, the Bay Area is actually really cool. It's a you feel the energy in this area. It's completely different to what you would find in other places in the world. Uh, to live, I think Singapore also comes quite close. Yeah, I think Singi is, I think, 20 to 25 years ahead of most places on Earth. It's also a city that's really set up for the future. It has a great startup ecosystem, a great funding ecosystem, and it's for the hub to Asia Pacific. Yeah, so it's between those two.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I will delve more into your journey and everything that led into where you are now. What would probably be quite good, and a lot of people listening will know who Fieldwire is, but what makes you guys unique, maybe compared to one of your competitors?
Yeah, I think the space of construction project management, there are quite a few players. Procore and Autodesk Construction Cloud are obviously the big ones. And Fieldwire has also been around since, like I mentioned, 2013. I think what makes us unique is that we are field focused. And that's the origin story of Fieldwire. At the end of the day, Fieldwire was started by two gentlemen named Eve and Javed. Eve actually studied construction in Stanford, and he was extremely frustrated with what he saw in construction, where everything was still non-digitized. It was paper and pen. But he also saw that most of the solutions out there to support construction crews on field were not really built from a field perspective. Yeah, and he had some gaming experience, and Javed also had some gaming experience, and they decided to gamify construction project management so that we put the field worker at the center. And that's also in our name. Fieldwire literally has the word field in it. Yeah, so our secret sauce is that we are field focused. Yeah, and we always tell our customers that if one of your job site workers can use a mobile app on his smartphone, they can learn Fieldwire. There is no training required. It's something which is extremely easy to use. You discover features on the go. Yeah, and it's very easy to set up a construction project within a couple of hours. In an evening, you can set it up and a crew can get up and running. Yeah, and we want to deliver a very quick value to money. Yeah, and that's the secret sauce of Fieldwire. It's us being very field focused.
Definitely. Look, I mean, you touched on it there. The usability of a construction technology software is so important that it's not too complicated. When you're talking to construction managers, general contractors, whatever it be, they are very used to legacy softwares. They're used to knowing what they know. So getting them to change is generally quite hard. So if it's a complicated piece of software and it's not easy to use, they're probably not going to want to roll it out to their teams. It needs to be in their pocket. It needs to be accessible from wherever they are on the construction site or in the field, as mentioned. I mean, obviously that must be a massive selling point for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. We do not want to just succeed in giving a great demo to the decision maker. We actively want our software to work and to help crews on the field. And in fact, we go to the extent that we would rather that crews on the field do not spend a lot of time on Fieldwire. We would much rather that they build, because they are building enthusiasts at the end of the day. They're not software usage enthusiasts, right? So we want to keep them on our platform for as little time as possible. And we want to make it super easy for them to collaborate and coordinate with each other. But at the same point of time, we would much rather that they go back to building. So that's the essence of what we try to do.
Definitely. Well, look, where I'd love to take the podcast is a little bit into recruitment. So I'd love to understand what Puneet's method of madness is for getting the right team in place.
Yeah, I think you asked a very interesting question, Oliver. And recruitment for us is also very dependent on the stage of the company. Yeah, when Fieldwire was much smaller and we were in a startup base, the recruitment method was very different. And also the blast radius of anyone coming in is quite huge, right? When you're a 20-person company, you simply can't afford to have someone who's not performing. You still can't as a much larger company. Yeah, but the objectives will be very different. So typically what we have seen is when we were much smaller, we used to hire a lot of generalists. Yeah, and we wanted people who could roll up their sleeves and take on any challenge. And that's still a very core part of our culture. We are very much an individual contributor oriented culture at Fieldwire. We like to hire people who have extreme levels of ownership. We do not want to micromanage them. We hire them so that they can tell us what to do, not so that me sitting in this room can tell them what to do, right? That's a quote by Steve Jobs, by the way, which I absolutely love. But at the core, we are an individual contributor oriented. But as we have grown bigger and scaled, and especially post acquisition, where we have grown almost three and a half times with the support of the Hilti Group, we are increasingly seeing that the personas whom we hire have also to be able to work in a scaled up environment. Yeah, and that's typically not the same persona whom you would have hired as a much smaller startup. Yeah, so we prefer now specialists in their field, yeah, who can develop scaled up processes and can work globally, because we've also expanded globally now, versus startup oriented generalists. And that's, I think, the big shift that has happened in our
Yeah, definitely. I love the fact you talked on the two different sides, because it is such a general question I ask, but every company you could do go through different stages, and you do require those individuals, because at the end of the day, the idea of keeping hold of all of those staff that you originally had when you were only 20 is very unlikely. The people move on, they're generalists for a reason, or they prefer that smaller environment, whereas now being slightly larger, that you need those people that fit into those cogs and actually are part of a bigger organization. I mean, personally, like me, I'm better in smaller companies because I'm not that much process orientated, and following instructions from people was never my strongest suit. Probably showing too many cards there, but that's where I'm better. I'm better to be a bit more free-willed and be able to do the things, try things all the time, versus, okay, we're a cog in a machine and this is how we do things, this is why it works.
Yeah. I think the key challenge is to maintain that culture where we want to be a startup. We are just a much larger startup, and we also know that now if you're and we are present in now 23 countries, and if you want to launch in country number 24, somebody has to transport processes which are working very well in the US, but now you have to take it to a different country far away, and you have to also launch it over there. And we can't have every country then cook up their own processes. We would much rather have global best practices than rolled out, and then it's a different kind of persona who we end up recruiting.
Definitely. And I mean, that brings its own challenge in its right of when you're a US based company, how people work, let's say in Europe, is completely different. So being able to take the processes you have in the US and implicate them in Europe is so hard. I speak to I do business in Europe and US mainly. And when I have a US based company, a lot of Europeans are scared to work for you guys. Mainly because of, I mean, for one being difference of you get 14 days of holiday in the US versus the 28, 30, whatever it be, wherever you are in Europe. And it's just that different mentality of working. This is why I love working with US people. It's fast paced. We work hard. We're always active. Europe is a little bit more relaxed and in another way.
Since we are in August now, and nearly everyone in Europe is on month-long vacation, but I think to hire people who can work in that specific context, I think it'll be very tough if we were to transport the top-performing US team member to Europe. I think most probably they would fail, because they would not understand the cultural context. They would not understand the cues. They would also not understand how customers work. So a top-performing account executive in the US most probably is going to fail quite dramatically in Germany. Right?
Definitely. Honestly, I'm working with a couple of US companies that have expanded there recently, and even in the interview process, it's like I've gone to them and said, look, you're going to have to go about this slightly different. They're going to be maybe less intense and they're going to want a bit more of a relaxed lifestyle. That's just how it is. They still get the job done, but just the culture is so different. And I'd love to actually delve into that a bit more with you, of how you've gone about maintaining a culture within a growing organization that's being acquired by Hilti. Obviously, a massive name. How do you go about that?
Yeah, I think it's very important for founders and CEOs to define the core vision that they will not give up on. And for us, one of those core vision statements and core cultural vision statements is that we are an individual contributor oriented culture. Yeah, and we want to hire people who display these extreme levels of ownership. Yeah. I personally, when I was much younger in my career, I hated anyone who micromanaged me. I would much rather that you just give me my targets and get out of my way so that I can figure it out for myself. And that's exactly the environment that I want to create for my own team members as well. So we kind of are a self-selective group. You realize very quickly whether you fit in within Fieldwire or not. Yeah, because it's a certain type of persona who succeeds with us. And I think that's the core. Having established the core, there are other areas where you can be a little bit more flexible on. For instance, if you're hiring in Sweden or Germany, you have to hire people who have those cultural understanding of what works in Sweden or Germany, while once again not giving up on the core. I think you have to be very pragmatic on certain aspects, but also you have to not compromise on others.
No, definitely. No, I absolutely love that, and I think it is so important. Again, as we were talking about, that it's ever evolving, the culture will ever evolve, and to think that it will always remain the same is very unlikely. But having that scope of, okay, we've got the core values that we've always instilled, and continuing to remind people and rolling that out while also adapting to the changes that go on within an org. It's obviously super important.
Exactly. Because the company is a living organism at the end of the day, right? It's not the same company that we were 5 years ago. We have just grown 3 or 4 times in size since then. And every new person adds a new cultural component to the company. Like you said, it's very important for us to reiterate the core values and always be the gatekeeper of anyone coming in and make sure that they understand the core values and they're able to live up to that, but be a little bit flexible on the rest.
Definitely. Well, look, where I'd love to take the conversation is a little bit about, we'll start actually with your journey. So I'd love to, you can start as early on in your career as you want, but everything that sort of led up to now being the CEO of Fieldwire by Hilti.
Yeah, I think, the story that I always say is, hustle. Yeah. So my dad actually had multiple startups. And so I grew up in a very startup-y environment. Right. And, I was also the guy who at a very early age was helping him prospect and helping him generate leads. I remember way back in 1996 when I was 12-year-old, I was already on the internet trying to, find people whom he could speak to. And that, I think, has been a very core part of my upbringing. So first and foremost, at the heart of hearts, I'm a sales guy, because that's what I think every founder or CEO needs to do. You're always selling. You're selling a vision, or you're selling your company to a prospective employee, or you're raising money, then you're selling, once again, your startup's vision. I think first and foremost, we're all sales guys. And when I was in my teens, I was pretty clueless as to what I wanted to do. Yeah, so I ended up, I'm Indian origin, so typically in India, you end up doing degrees in engineering, which is what I did as well. And then I was lucky enough that I found a program run by this company called Unilever, which is a consumer goods major. And they had this program where you could join them and you could spend the first 18 months exploring. So I spent a couple of months exploring corporate accounts and treasury, hated it. Spent a couple of months exploring sales, loved it, exploring marketing. So I spent the first 18 months literally exploring. And at the end of it, I decided, okay, I like sales, I like product, and I like tech. And those are the 3 things that I've kind of formed my career. So throughout the rest of the career, I've primarily done roles in sales, product, and tech. I've kind of tried to do whatever was required for my product or business to grow at that point of time. Yeah. So when it required me to be the best salesperson, I joined sales and I drove sales. And at some point of time, it required me to transition into product. I did product. At some point of time, I actually became an engineering manager for mobile apps. Yeah, having not done engineering for a while, because though I have a background in it, I had not written code or not really delved into it, but that was the requirement of the time. So I shaped myself into an engineering manager. Yeah, I think it was those experiences which eventually formed the basis or gave me a strong foundation to start leading software businesses. Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's what any CEO has to be. He has to be a general manager, know enough to ask good questions, yeah, and to be able to guide team members, but also at the same point of time, set ambitious targets and try and get out of the way so team members can do what they're best suited for. Yeah?
Definitely. I think if you can bring that broader spectrum of understanding towards the engineering side, the sales, as a CEO, you're going to be way more successful. You're obviously having that overview of everything. But if you've never really delved into that area, then how are you meant to guide or communicate with them or understanding? So actually having that broader spectrum has probably allowed you to be where you are now and obviously a top company. And I love the fact you talked about obviously the sales side as a CEO. It's something that I see, whether it's in recruitment companies, tech companies, whatever it be, that I always give one piece of advice is that the CEO still needs to be selling. They still need to be, you are the face, you are the person that can bring the highest level of trust in any deal situation. As soon as like if I'm buying something and I'm talking to the CEO, I know that I'm going to get the truth or the best understanding. I'm not being overly sold to this guy is in that position for a reason. And if he can show the belief in the product and have that good understanding, then yeah, normally I'm on the winning side. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and also I think it's important for CEOs to sell, because when you are putting yourself in front of the customer, first of all, I think customers tend to give you brutal feedback, which is a gift. This is the best gift that they can give you. But also over time, I've realized that my customers are my best teachers. They know, they figure out the real value of the product. You, I think, have an idea of what the value of the product could be. But when your customers actually use it, that's a wholly different perspective that you get. But at the same point of time, when you're selling, I think you give customers a peace of mind that they can pick up the phone and call up the CEO. And I think that's very important, especially when you're talking to larger enterprise customers. The fact that there is access to the C-suite is, I think, a big clincher in many cases.
Definitely. I think it actually applies to all types of leadership. If we talk about, for example, VPs of sales, that if they've been off the tools and are not involved speaking to clients and actually, as you said, getting the feedback from them, how can they guide and how can they coach their team effectively? All you're taking is maybe this early stage SDR or account executive saying something to you, but you're going, no, that's not true. Well, actually, unless you actually try yourself, let's say we're talking about the cadence of how they approach clients or the methods of bringing in new clients isn't working. Okay, what's the best way to find out? Okay, you go and try it. If it doesn't work for you as meant to be the top dog, then there's something wrong. And you can work out and you can find out what that issue is. And I have a lot of VPs of sales on this show, CROs, and I can tell you the best ones and the ones who have the most amount of success are the ones who are doing exactly that. They're not afraid to pick up the phone and speak to the client and find out, okay, what is the issue with our software? What is the issue with our sales process? And quickly you'll learn what that issue is.
Exactly. And when I joined Fieldwire, which was around a year ago, I was actually leading another software product on the Hilti Group side, which is On Track. And I knew that I'm going to join Fieldwire as the CEO. But I spent the first 4 or 5 months being an intern. And I also told all the team members, treat me like you would treat an intern. So hit me with everything, give me all your admin tasks, let me actually go through the rigmarole and learn. Because that's the best way to actually figure stuff out.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. What I'd love to delve a little bit into is actually driving revenue. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are behind being important in 2025 for getting new clients, or we could talk about retaining clients as well.
Yeah, I think both of them are equally important, but talking very specifically about new clients, I think it's very important to have a sharp idea of the ideal customer profile, ICP as it is known in the industry, because it's very easy to get attracted by a customer who could be a big potential ticket, but is not your ideal customer. And that can drive your team in a very wrong direction. It could drive product crazy. It could drive engineering crazy. It could drive customer success crazy because you're trying to create processes for a company or a potential customer rather than for your bigger mass. And that's when you tend to become a service-oriented company rather than a product company. So for us, I think the main piece is to ensure that we have a very good understanding of our ideal customer profile. And that for us, Fieldwire is any self-performing contractor or general contractor, any specialized contractor or self-performing general contractor, anyone who has field teams who understands the pain that field teams go through to coordinate. That's the best possible customer for us. And if you are a very large general contractor who does not have any field teams who are only subcontracting, that's actually outside of our customer profile. So we actively then say no to such potential customers, and we rather focus on our ICP. And here is where the acquisition that Hilti did with Fieldwire actually comes into effect. Because if you think about Hilti is a large equipment manufacturer and sells to construction companies worldwide. And if you think about who your typical customer is at the Hilti group, if you have a tool park, if you have self-performing crews, that's when you need tools and you need equipment. And then you're a customer potentially of Hilti. And that's why it's such a great fit with the Fieldwire ICP that the acquisition makes total sense for us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is an awesome acquisition to have. I mean, as you said, basically, it's something that we've talked about a lot on the podcast in the past few months of the having that trust or having someone to refer you to something. You've got it in a sense of you've got a massive client, have existing clients and go, look, we recommend you work with this. And actually vice versa. If you pull a client, it's like, okay, cool. Do you need tools? You go with them or manufacturing, whatever it be. It's actually in the sense having that constant referral from one side to the other versus it always being like a cold outreach or whatever it be, which in 2025 people are buying on trust, they're buying on relationships. They're the two main things. And obviously with Hilti bringing those relationships already, it only allowed you obviously to expand even further.
Yeah, exactly. And it also just gives us a very good reference brand name because Hilti is a very well-known brand in construction. And also gives customers peace of mind that we are not, yet another startup. We are actually backed by a big group, so there's longevity. If Hilti has decided to put its name behind the company and now we are called Fieldwire by Hilti, it means that we'll be around for the next decade and possibly for the next 25 years. So this is a company that you can trust to undergo your digital transformation with.
Definitely. Yeah. What I'd love to delve into is identifying future leaders. I'd love to get your perspective on what do you deem to be the key characteristics of a good leader?
From my perspective, the key characteristic of a good leader is to be able to fit the company at the current juncture where the company is. It is to be specific to that current juncture. As an example, we are now in the midst of international expansion post-acquisition. We need leaders who have done international expansion before. And if you have not done that, most probably you'll find it very difficult to succeed simply because, this is something which is unique. It's very different from, being a CRO of a 50-person startup versus having several hundreds of team members working worldwide, right? If you're looking for a CRO now, look for a CRO with a very different set of objectives. So what I typically do as best practice is while we have job descriptions, which are, candidate facing, I also write a internal facing position objective. So what is the objective of this position? What is it exactly that we are looking for in this person? Several times it could be that I'm looking for a person to come in, do a role for a while, pick up some tools in their toolkit and go on and do an even bigger role. And that's not something that you would put out in the job description, but you should know internally when you are recruiting. It should be a part of the position objective that the recruiter knows and that so that you both are able to work closely on.
Every role is going to be a growth role in a sense, something of, you're not going to put it out there because people are going to read too much into it, but actually your role should in turn evolve as such.
Exactly.
So bringing those new responsibilities of you're a CRO, how could maybe one day you leave, how could we step into a CEO role?
Exactly.
VP of sales into a CRO, whatever it be. I love that. And I think it's something that people don't really talk about a lot on the podcast is that there are two JDs. There's the one we advertise, which is the glitz and glam, perfect one. Then we've got the JD behind of, okay, this is what we're looking for, this is what we need, and this is where we need their motivations to align to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think by and large, the two JDs are 90% similar. I think the differential is in terms of what kind of cultural aspects are we looking for, what kind of candidate potential are you looking for, what will be their next role if we were to hire them. And that's also what we would test for inherently.
Definitely. Forward thinking is so important. Well, look, to finish off the podcast, as I said, we always talk about work-life balance. I'd love to know how you manage traveling around the world, being a CEO of a big company, and also having a little bit of personal time, I hope.
Yeah, I think the piece that I prioritize the most is fun. We spend an inordinate amount of our lives at work, right? Even if it's your own company or if it's a company that you're employed with. And it's very important to make sure that you are having fun at work. And that's something that I prioritize significantly. Because if you're having fun at work, you will not have an issue with work-life balance. And then we also treat all our team members as adults. We are a remote-first company at Fieldwire, and we continue to lean into remote-first, primarily because it attracts a certain type of persona, which is a persona who is operationally very independent, has extreme levels of ownership, and as part and parcel of that, you should be able to manage your work and life in any way you deem fit. And this is and if you're able to recruit in that manner, you'll also be able to offer work-life balance. You'll be able to put in those hours and burn midnight oil when it's required, but at the same point in time, you'll also know when to take the pedal off the metal and just relax when it is required.
Definitely. Look, I think it's so important of that. Look, I run my business from home, and that is what I love. But actually, you are right. That I've worked for a company where they weren't remote first, and we were expected to be in the office 5 days a week from 7 till 7 doing recruitment. And the biggest issue with that was I always felt like there was no trust. There was no trust in me as an individual to go and do my job and fit my life in and around it. And as you said, when you give that option to someone, okay, it's not for everyone. Like some people would love to be in an office, but the people who can work from home and be successful, they're the ones who are self-motivated, they're driven, they're the ones who are going to be able to bring the company to the next level, but do it while also managing their life in between. And I think that's
Exactly.
the thing.
Exactly. I think there's a certain kind of persona who succeeds in that. Yeah. So unfortunately, I think remote work has got a lot of flack for also many rightful reasons. We have some people who have misused it as well. Yeah, whereby being overemployed and working with 2 or 3 different companies full time. And that's the kind of stuff that actually brings this entire piece down. However, we lean into it because we feel that we can attract the right kind of persona. Yeah. And so far, that's proven to be successful for us.
Definitely, it is a shame that you have people with the term moonlighting, having those 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever it be. And it is a shame because 90% of people would never dream of doing that. They're dedicated, they're motivated, but obviously there are the fair few that do let it down with the rest of the industry. And then I know in times, actually, from an external recruiter, I've noticed that a lot of companies are moving away from this remote first side, especially with their sales staff. And I am always stressing to them, I go, the pool of candidates you have when hiring as a remote first is huge. If you can interview accordingly, that you can get down to the nitty gritty with them of, okay, are we going to be able to trust this individual? Then fine. And I get why startups are moving away from this model because of a bad hire as a startup very early on costs you a lot of money and can potentially bankrupt a company very quickly. So I do get it, but I do love the fact of how you stressed actually it allows you to find those people who are like operationally self-sufficient. I think it's a great term.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I agree. I think with startups, the blast radius is simply higher, and I can see why there's a move to bring people back to work. Yeah, I also think maybe for certain leadership positions, it's better to collaborate in person. But for the vast amount of individual contributor roles, I believe that we can still pull it off as long as we find people who are dedicated and committed to Fieldwire. Yeah, and also have those values that we spoke about, which is operationally independent. Yeah, high degrees of ownership. I think we can still pull it off.
Definitely. Well, look, I have one final question, and it's not something I would have given you on the sheet because it's my little buzz question. If you could give one piece of advice to 27-year-old Puneet, what advice would you give?
Stop worrying about specializing, rather generalize, explore more. Yeah, I think the more you explore and the bigger foundation you have, the bigger the chances are that you will succeed in the future.
Definitely. I absolutely love that advice. Very prevalent for me. I'm 27 years old, so I always ask this question. But for me, it's so prevalent of when I started this company, I tried to specialize into one sector. And actually, once I started to broaden the horizons, try different things, try different methods for bringing in clients, this is how the podcast came about, and this is how it generates all my business now. And I actually stumbled into the construction tech world, and now that's where I do all my business versus where I was like, I want to do cybersecurity. I'm going to niche down on that. I'm going to do cold calling. Actually, we moved away. We now run a podcast and we now do business and contact. It's how everything can change when you sort of open your eyes to new opportunities versus, okay, this is what I know. I'm just going to stick with that. And sometimes actually doing that actually has a greater impact on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, look, Puneet, that was super awesome. I can't thank you enough for being a guest on the show. I know it's going to be super useful for any of the listeners. And again, wishing you all the success in your career.